the talk, sex education, it blows my mind how as an adolescent these concepts were pretty much foreign to me, and we would always make such a big deal about the last few pages of the book just because it was a lesson in a course on like human reproduction, and it showed you all of the male sex organs and the female sex organs, and we would all literally make the biggest deal about that and pretend as though it was some big, ritual, it was some big, hoo-ha to like learn about it. And honestly, I think we've really mastered this art of dismissal and deniability when it comes to these issues. It took a bunch of 13-year-old kids to look at the back of the biology book to understand what was happening with their bodies, to understand what was happening with their lives.
You look at just representations of men, they're seen as porn watching, masturbating being, whose sexuality is, out there, it's normalized, everything. Women, on the other hand, their sexuality is not spoken about as much, like they're seen as people who love romance and who only have sex, to give man the pleasure. It's not something that, it's not their need or it's not something that they want, and this sort of understanding of female sexuality, which is, rather lack of understanding of female sexuality, in addition to, amplification of this kind of representation in, popular culture, etc. If you translate it into what it leads to in our sexual interactions, it causes what Roland calls the pleasure gap.
And even then, when we have these conversations, it is restricted to STDs, teenage pregnancies, how it's somehow dirty, we're not old enough, rather than also the emotional and mental tolls that comes with these strange but significant experiences in our life. It's not just about the physical aspects of it, and I don't think, honestly, anyone prepares us for the messiness that is adolescent life, that is having a sex life in today's world. And female sexuality, for that matter, is just something that's completely shoved under the rug.
What can we do about it? At the cost of sounding preachy, I'm going to talk about two simple things that we can do. One is to talk about sex. It's so important to talk about sex, and I don't mean like sex education is so important, but I don't mean like biology, putting a condom on a banana. Talking about consent, talking about female pleasure, talking about things like that is very important at an educational, like institutional, school level, but also just talking amongst each other, parents having their children, etc. And secondly is to promote ethical porn sites. There are so many websites out there that promote and showcase ethical porn, and I think we need to shift to that and also promote them so much so that different representations of sex can come out through the same means.
And I think till this day, when I first read about FGM, for that matter, and how in a lot of countries women's hymen are examined to ensure that they're still pure, that they haven't had sex, that they're not sexually active, is something that will always tug at me, because once again, female sexuality is something that is completely cast off. We're treated as our desires, our happiness, our sorrows are completely passed over like everything else. You take away our jobs, you take away our children, you take away our lives, you make us labor, you make us suffer, and this remains yet another instance where that continues to happen.
For a woman who's confident enough and I feel like sexually emancipated enough to have a conversation about female sexuality, I believe sex is again at the core of when we talk about this issue. For me, I believe sex is about two people, but at the same time, sex is about you as well.
There are a lot of women who don't ask to be pleasured sexually because they think that it's odd or that will turn the man off or things like that.
I read this very interesting excerpt from Pierre Bourdieu's Masculine Domination, where he talks about sex positions like the missionary position kind of reinstigate this idea of the man being in authority by him being on top, whereas the woman is under him and she's in this meek, submissive position where she doesn't have much agency over her body, over her orgasms.
There are a lot of women who are comfortable with pleasuring a man sexually, like giving a blowjob, but are not comfortable with a man going down on them because, you know, their body is something that is so, you know, like how can somebody give them sexual pleasure? Because no one's spoken about that.
Especially like portrayed in the pornography, they have faked it so much, and people are becoming very anxious about their performance. And many of my female friends, they even think that if they don't perform well or they don't please another one, they will feel bad about themselves, and that's just not necessary.
And I just think penetration is just too often seen as the definition of sex, especially for women. I believe that oral and digital sex, like caressing and fingering, are so underrated because generally people consider them as foreplays when they can just be entirely considered sex. Sex is about giving and receiving pleasure, and with those two types, you just focus on one of these two elements, so it works. You either just enjoy the moment or you're giving your partner pleasure and getting satisfaction out of it. The most essential thing for me in sex is communication, for consent and for pleasures, yours as much as your partner's, asking what they like, how, the kinks, etc.
There are still some girls that they might think that they don't want to express what they want. They want to let the guy guess what they want. And the guys are always so confused. And what I'm saying is communication is very important. If you want it, you can just say it. You don't need to fake it or just like try to play hard to get.
Another issue I think is body image and sex, because a lot of women kind of view their bodies negatively given the impositions of the porn industry or the ideal body standard of what a woman is supposed to look like.
You know, when we're fighting for equality in the workplace, equality in all spheres of life, but we're not equal in one of the most intimate encounters that humans have.
Sex is just like eating, exercising, and drinking water. It's part of the daily activities. And you don't need to pressure yourself into thinking, oh, I didn't drink the water well. No, that's not it. Just enjoy it.
I really think sex is about finding an equilibrium, and I think the best way to do that is to be really open and talk about it. So on a personal note, from my personal experience, I've been with my boyfriend for 4 years now. And on my side, we've had to work out the fact that I have a light BDSM kink, I wasn't comfortable on my period, that we both had gender roles, preconceptions, that, for example, I did and I still consider sex to be different than a couple, than romantic life, which he does not. And so for me that meant that I don't consider sex and sexual life to be an exclusive concepts. So we've had to work these things out.
Sex is important. It's not the end of the world, but you deserve orgasms and you deserve an amazing experience. Whatever works for you, you communicate, you stay in charge, and you feel powerful and, more importantly, so confident about who you are.
I've grown up in a family with traditional Chinese values, and this topic remains a taboo. However, it is an irreplaceable part of my growth.
Masturbation is an amazing way of getting to know your body and just becoming more sexually empowered, sexually emancipated, knowing what works for you.
I started to masturbate at a pretty young age, before I have any sexual consciousness. When I reached 6th grade in primary school, I gradually realized what I was doing slowly. I felt guilty with it immediately. I was afraid to admit my sexual urge.
I know being a woman, it's such a huge taboo to even have this discussion, but it's great for your understanding of sex and your understanding of your own body.
I tried to avoid it and fell into a period of self-denial.
It's just looked down upon, I think not just for women but just in the society as a whole.
When I stepped into junior school, I also stepped into my time of self-accept. The book called The Unbearable Nightmares of Being by Milan Kundera played an important role in the establishment of my sexual notion. And I also liked a lot of erotic films. They lead me to understand the beauty of libido.
I think masturbation as a very manifest outcome of it leads to you being more sex positive, you being more body positive, and you being more, I think, outright and confident about what you want.
The fact that I could face and accept my libido gave me more courage when I began to have relationships. I can say that if I didn't accept my libido, I won't be the girl I am now.
I think growing up in a society where a conversation about sex and sexuality has always been a taboo, porn often, for people like me, has always been our primary introduction to what sex is supposed to look like. And that thus plays into us forming a conception about what sex actually is.
If you look at porn and the kind of representations of sex in porn, it is usually when the man is done, the sex is done, and it's penetration centric. It largely shows that a woman derives pleasure from a man's satisfaction.
As a woman, I have come to realize that most of the porn out there, it caters to the male gaze.
Gender encounters and sexual behavior that is highly associated and favorable to male pleasure. Women are shown as, always ready, they don't know what they want, objects, quite literally, who have noisy, easy orgasms.
As a woman, I found myself in a very confusing dichotomous situation whether I should feel turned on by this outright objectification of a woman's body, or because in society a woman's body is so heavily sexualized, I should completely be okay with being aroused by it.
I started to watch porn after the process of self-accept, so I always hold an open attitude towards it. For me, it is a tool to save the good moments. We've both agreed to do so. I am even interested in participating in it, in doing my own porn.
Also, one of the bigger issues of porn is just how unnatural the sex they project is and how unrealistic are the impositions of those expectations that come out of it.
According to porn, the route to a female's pleasure is through a big hard dick. It's the ultimate, source of a woman's pleasure. So there's this sort of phallocentric representation of sex that porn puts forth and that porn internalizes and normalizes.
They do not talk about issues like vaginismus or perhaps conversations, consent, actually communicating with your partner about what works for you and what doesn't.
Just if you look at the categories of porn, there is rape, there's revenge porn, there is porn in which she's asking for it, or she gets blackmailed into it, or she doesn't know that she wants it. It blurs the lines of consent majorly. So because there's lack of sexual education, because sex is such a taboo topic, we don't talk about it. Female pleasure is a taboo topic, we don't talk about it. So we as a society have bought into this sort of understanding of this is how sex is going to be, this is how female pleasure is going to be. Porn shows men as being sexually and socially dominant, and we as a society have bought it. It's become staple culture. So that is the problem, men and women have started to accept and internalize this kind of sex that is propagated by porn.
Apart from our own understanding, I believe the notion held by those around us towards porn and masturbation is also very important for individuals. For me, I am always an avant-garde among all my friends under these kind of topics. However, I can always share with them my opinions and my experiences, and they did never judge me. This contributed a lot to my self-confidence.
I think female sexual orientation gets a lot of attention, but for the wrong reason. People love to control what women do with their bodies, and that includes their sexual orientation. I've heard people say that lesbians are more accepted by society than gay men. But I think it's not true. Women who date women are not more accepted. They are sexualized by society. And by society, I mean by men. I can count the number of times I've heard or read men say, oh, lesbians are so hot. And if you don't believe me, check out the popularity of the lesbian page on YouPorn. So most of the representation of women's sexual orientation outside of heteronormativity is through the male gaze. They think women don't have sex with other women for their own pleasure, but for men's pleasure. I think it's because they can't stand being left out of the equation. They need to be the center of attention all the time.
In China, due to a lot of regulation, there are not so many of the gay parade or protests per se. So I feel like it's just an ideology that's been spreading, but not really like a material effort put on it, or like protest or any visualized version of how people are gradually accepting the concept of LGBTQ. In 2019 or 2020, there's this very popular television show in China, which is called Untamed. It's actually being adopted from a gay fiction. It's called 魔道祖师, and a lot of young girls like that. And I feel like it's really a huge effort to let the mainstream media to adopt like a gay fiction and like just put it on TV. And I feel like as the internet has developed so much, people are like, especially the older generation in China, they're facing a lot of new information.
I'm androsexual. People also call it masexuality. It's when a person is attracted to masculinity in general. So most of the people I'm attracted to are, as you can deduce it, cisgender men. But I've had crushes on non-binary people, on trans men. And really, being a cisgender man is not at all a criteria. I've never felt left out of the community because everybody I've ever talked to were really okay with it. I know that some would argue that I'm not in the community because, as most people perceive me as straight, I'm hardly ever gonna face any discrimination based on my sexual orientation. So that's a point I can hear, but I don't think that's a good one.
I also wish heterosexual people would stop making everything about them. I remember when I was dating a girl, one of my friends asked me, but how do you have sex? I don't recall asking heterosexual people how they have sex. I can understand part of where that question comes from, because heterosexuality is seen as the norm. Non-heterosexual relations are kind of unknown. In sexual education classes, everything was about heterosexual relations. So the only idea that I had about lesbian relations, for example, were coming from porn, which is not the best reference.
Most of my friends from high school, actually 7 out of 8 of them, are not straight. So that's what participated mostly to open my eyes about the fact that even though I was open about everybody's sexuality, I had more preconceptions on female and women's sexuality than on men's sexuality. So that's what I had to come around understanding and educating myself, and I really don't regret it.
Hello everyone, my name is Ariel, and I hope that you have enjoyed our latest She episode on female sexuality. We believe that female sexuality is a topic that has been long mythologized and also complicated by our society. And this is exactly the reason why we want to make this episode, because we believe that to talk about female sexuality, it should be as easy as drinking a cup of water. If you like our content, please don't forget to like our video and also subscribe to our channel. And please stay tuned for more episodes in the future. We will see you next time. Goodbye.